Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast, hosted by yours truly, Scott Howell, and the incomparable Bradley Flowers. For agents, by agents, we're here to share real-life experiences, tips, and insights related to all aspects of both being an insurance agent and running a successful agency. So sit back, turn up the volume, and let's get down to business. Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast. I am your fearless host, Mr. Scott Howell from I Protect Insurance and Financial Services based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's episode, please help me welcome. He's a 6'3" sophomore from Saraland, Alabama. First team parade All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the incomparable Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
I'm great, Scott. How are you?
Man, I am doing fantastic. I am fired up about this episode today. More fired up than I've been talking about because I've been sitting here for the past 15, 20 minutes writing notes about this sucker. Guys, we've got an interesting podcast for you today. Your fearless host here is trying his dead level best to put on his time machine memory hat and remember back to the day when I started as a scratch insurance agent. I believe it was in 2010, July of 2010. I started as a scratch insurance agent. Before that, I had been an associate agent with another scratch insurance agent with State Farm in Birmingham, Alabama. So I feel kind of like I've done this twice. And I am excited about this episode because I've had to put my thinking hat on and remember back to some of the tricks and things I did and things I made mistakes on, things I wish I could do differently. But this is an episode that's going to be near and dear to my heart because I love a challenge. I love that opportunity to take something that's really starts as nothing and building it into something great. And that's really when you get out there and you start building an insurance agency from scratch, that is your opportunity to build a business the way that you want to. But it's also a very, very big challenge.
And we felt like this is an episode we have to do.
Absolutely.
Because we've had multiple requests for an episode on the one-man show.
And you know, I think one of the things, and guys, we got an email, I think it was last week, from a guy by the name of DeCarlo Harrison. DeCarlo, shout out to you, brother. He's in Pikesville, Maryland. He is the principal agent of his own shop. It is with a national recognized carrier. He is a one-man show, and we've had other individuals kind of send the same message to us that they wish we'd do a podcast on this. Now, I'm going to say a couple things today. Some of it you may not like, some of it you may love. You know, I think that there are previous podcasts that we have done, Bradley, that probably answer a lot of these questions, but they were done in a way where we may have answered one question over here or one question over there. I don't know that we've put together one full podcast of just, hey, I'm a one-man show. How are we going to get this done? You know? Yeah. I know in episodes 1 and 2, maybe 3, when we first started, and guys, if you have a chance, go back and listen to those very first podcasts. I know when I say he, I mean Bradley and I, we kind of gave a narrative of how we got started in the business.
That was sort of the evolution of the podcast.
Absolutely.
But as we sort of did it, it sort of became a thing of its own.
Exactly.
So to speak. One of the biggest compliments I think that I get from people and that we get from people is that we don't try to act like we know everything.
Right, because we don't.
Right. And bringing these experts on allows us to bring a little bit of value. And I look for areas that I'm weak in.
Absolutely.
And we just sort of go from there.
Well, and as a matter of fact, I think you and I probably get the most excited on podcasts when we have guests on that we know are about to bring something to the table that you and I don't know.
I have never been more excited in my life than before we had Jeff Roy on because two things. One, I'm a huge fan, and I can completely fangirl out on that, on him because he's into all the Alexa stuff. And I mean, he's so many steps ahead of everybody else. And I don't even know if he knows that.
No, he doesn't.
But also, I knew that most, if not all of our audience were going to be like, what the heck did I just hear? And probably listen to it again.
Exactly.
So
I'm excited about today's podcast. Number one, it kind of takes me back. And I think sometimes in life, whether it's a personal relationship or your business, I think it's good to kind of go back and rewind and think about when you started and things you've done well and things you haven't done well. and try to audit yourself and kind of remember back to that time when you started and what all's changed and how you've grown. And I've had to do a lot of that because this is a podcast that we're on right now, this episode, that I've been thinking about pretty much the entire week has been in the back of my mind. And I'm not going to say I've been thinking about it all week, but I would say every day for the past week, I've probably spent anywhere from an hour or 2 hours just driving down the road thinking about, okay, what do I want to say in terms of trying to remember what went well, what didn't go well.
Yeah, because you're a long way from that now. I mean, you've got 3 locations and 8 or 9.
Yeah, that was 8 years ago. I mean, that was a long time ago.
It's pre-bubble, or right at the bubble. That's an interesting time to start an agency.
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was. So guys, I think before we get started, I want to talk a little bit to Bradley about kind of a precursor to some of the things I wanted to talk about today. And I think before we talk about a one-man shop and what I call the rules of the one-man shop here, I want to go back up even further than that, because if you're in a one-man shop by yourself, you don't have any CSRs, you don't have a book of business, or maybe it's a small book of business. I think,
and we're not endorsing that or starting with 3 team members. We're just giving advice for that situation because we've had people, hey, look, it's just me.
Right.
Similar to Andrew Cooney,
sure,
who we had on in the very beginning of the podcast.
Right. So. Yeah. So, there's really 2 ways to get into the insurance business in terms of starting an agency. You can start a scratch agency where you have 0 premium or very little premium, or you can go out if you have the financial means and you can buy an agency. I've had very successful insurance agents tell me in the past 2 or 3 years that they would never go out and start a scratch agency, that they would try to go out and buy an independent agency or an exclusive agency, captive agency, book of business from the company that they would represent, rather than trying to go out and just start a scratch agency on their own. I've had people tell me that. I had a guy with Allstate tell me one time, he said, I would rather go lay down in traffic than start a scratch agency. I wouldn't get into the insurance business if I had less than $1 million to start with. In terms of a book of business, $1 million book of business. It is a hard road to hoe, but I'm going to assume if you're a one-man shop and you're there by yourself, that either you haven't grown in a long time if you've been doing it a while, or you've just gotten started, fairly recently within the last, 1, 2, 3 years, and it may be that you've only been in it for 6 months and you're just sitting there, by yourself writing business. But Bradley, I think before we get started, as a precursor to this, the one thing I would say is there needs to be a lot of questions answered before you ever get into it, before you ever start, okay? Number 1, I think you need a business plan. And I think as part of that business plan, you need to have an intent on where do I want to be
and how are we going to do it,
and how are we going to do it, and what do I want to sell, who do I want to sell to, what kind of insurance do I want to sell. All those questions need to be answered by you as an individual before you ever step into the game. Before you get off the sidelines, we need to figure out business plan, what do you want to sell. And my advice to anybody, and this goes back to episode 1 or 2, I can't remember, is you need to go out and find the best product at the best price that you can stick your chest out and be proud to sell every day, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that will go a long way towards maybe you not being a one-man show for very long. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Whatever that is, the best product and the best price is whatever the best is for you.
Correct.
The best for you may be independent, it may be captive, it may be hybrid.
Right.
But it's find the best thing for you that's going to allow you to be the most successful. Do you agree?
I do. And I think you can help yourself in that regard if you find a good mentor to kind of help guide you through that at the beginning. Doesn't mean you got to go to work for them, but maybe it's an older agent that's been in the business a while, or somebody that you can lean on and say, hey, I've got this option, and this option. Which one would you choose? I mean, can you imagine if I would have had Chris Paradiso, or you would have had Chris Paradiso way back when, to call up before we ever even stepped foot in an insurance agency office the first time?
Glad I have him now. Shout out Chris.
Shout out to Chris Paradiso. So guys, get a mentor, figure out what you want to sell. Have your intent ready in terms of what products you want to sell. From a geography standpoint, if I want to sell condominium complexes on the Gulf Coast, I probably don't need to live in Louisville, Kentucky, right? I know that sounds simple. I had a guy call me today, wanted to get, he had a lot of questions for me from the podcast. And as we got to talking, he said, my previous life, I was in the oil rig business, and I'd really like to sell insurance for oil rigs, but the problem is I don't live anywhere around oil rigs. And I'm like, well, that's a big problem from a geography standpoint.
Somebody told me one time, they said, look for loan officers for such and such bank. Mm-hmm. They loan a certain kind of loan to a specific business. I'm not going to say what it is.
Right.
And they require you to have life insurance when you get a loan with them for this particular business.
Right.
And you can get in with that loan officer. And I was actually on a trip/retreat when I talked to this guy that told me this, and he had written several $100,000 in life insurance. And I went back to my office when we got back, all excited, like, I'm going to find there was not a business in which this company loaned money to for within 250 miles. 300 miles. And it was now that I've confused everybody, it was chicken farms.
Right.
There was not a chicken farm. People up in Wisconsin or wherever are listening to this and laughing at me like, he's talking about chicken farms and this country accent. But it was chicken farms, and they require you to have life insurance, a specific bank, and there was not a chicken farm anywhere near where I am. Like, God, dog,
Well, I think to speak to what I just mentioned earlier about selling a great product that you believe in, and that's going to go a long way towards you going from a one-man shop to starting to hire people. Yeah. Because you're making commissions and you can afford to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I'm about to say later on, but just what I call capacity to do what you need to do to sell insurance. I'm going to tell a little story about myself real quick, and I don't think I've ever told this on the podcast before. But one of the big reasons I became a nationwide insurance agent, and as many of you know that are listening to this podcast right now, Nationwide has made the decision in the past 6 months to move their entire exclusive agency force to the independent channel.
What?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think there's anybody in the world that doesn't know that now. If they don't, now they do. But Nationwide's made that decision. I don't think it's necessarily a bad decision, and it's something that
You are in the minority of Nationwide agents.
I probably am. But I will say this.
In every category, not just on this subject.
Well,
You're a zebra.
I've always wanted to be an independent agent. So for me, call it luck, call it the stars aligning, whatever you want to call it. It has made me very happy because I've always now again, I go back to what my dad's always told me: don't wish for something too much, you just might get it. And that may be where this falls before it's all over with. But that is not something that's going to happen overnight. That's you're talking about July of 2020 before I can do that, or will do that, and have to do that. But it gives us enough time to get ready for that anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing. But so getting back to what I was going to say, here's my story. One of the big reasons I became a nationwide insurance agent, principal agent, was when the opportunity presented itself. My parents had always had nationwide insurance when I was growing up. And we had some claims, nothing major, but a few car wrecks and a totaled Honda and little things here and there. But Nationwide always handled those claims well. They always paid out, the amount that they should have paid out. And I knew that my mom and dad, especially my dad, always spoke real highly of Nationwide insurance. So for me, when I got ready to get in the insurance business and become a principal agent, I thought to myself, I need to be with a company that I know I can stick my chest out and say, I'm proud to represent this company. And by golly, we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And for me, that was Nationwide because of that very reason. Now, that has helped me go from being a one-man shop to where I am today because I can proudly say that I represent Nationwide Insurance. So, with that being said, you need a business plan. You need to know what you want to sell. You need to be in the right geography. You need to take a lot of things into consideration. I've always said I want to be where the fish are, fish where the fish are. Are you going to become a $100 million agency living in a 1,000-person town in Texas? Probably not. Unless you figure out how to get a contract with a company that writes oil rigs down in Texas and you came from that world and you've got relationships everywhere, then maybe you can do that. But you're not going to sell renters and home and auto insurance in a 1,000-person town in Texas and be a $100 million agency. But part of that's part of your business plan, figuring out what it is you want to do and how big you want to get and having those goals and having the resources to get there, right?
Absolutely.
But the first thing I would say to people is you better find a good product and a product that you can be proud to sell, because that in and of itself having that pride in what you're selling and the companies that you represent is going to take you from that one-man shop to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people.
You got to have the Kool-Aid. Everybody makes fun of the Kool-Aid. Everybody talks about the Kool-Aid, but every company's got Kool-Aid, whether it's the Kool-Aid of the independent agency or the Kool-Aid of the captive agency. Everybody's got it, and I don't think you can be a good salesperson without it. You know, Grant Cardone talks about believing in your product so much that it's unethical for you not to sell it to that person.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what you're getting at. Is you got to absolutely believe in what you're selling. Your goal does not need to be making money. Your goal needs to be to help those clients and help those people. And oh my God, I've got such a great product. I've got to tell everybody about it.
And that speaks to intent. To intent. Because the worst thing you can do, and I know this sounds hokey, guys, but I'm telling you, if you go out there and all you're worried about is your commission, and I got to sell this because I'm going to make this I'm serious when I say this. The insurance gods are going to frown on you, and this thing is not going to work because people, like dogs, can smell that your intent is, I just want to make a commission, right? And that kind of speaks to my next pre-Scott Howell rules of a one-man shop. Guys, you better be able to afford to go out and be able to open a one-man shop and not have to worry about writing bad business and not have to worry about how I'm going to eat this month and pay my car payment, because when that happens, then you start rationalizing and justifying writing bad business just to make a commission. I've seen people do this before. You know, they're either on a sales plan or maybe they're not on a sales plan, but they need to make money and they start writing stuff that otherwise they wouldn't write. It is very difficult when you start a scratch agency. I would not plan on making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 the first year that you get out there and start writing in a scratch agency. It's going to be lean. It's going to be a lean year. You know, even if you're a captive agent and the company that you represent saying, hey, we're going to match what you're making now the first year or two, I'm telling you at some point, and I've seen this with a lot of captive agencies where those big first-year commissions or the money that the company's paying you, all of a sudden after a year or 2 or 3, that goes away, and now you're used to a lifestyle based on what they've been paying you, and we can't afford that. We can't afford that big car. We can't afford that big house anymore. And then what I see from those people is they have gradually and eventually just kind of get out of the insurance business because they're like, you know, I've been making enhanced commissions with XYZ company for 24 months, and here it is October 1st of 2020, and those enhanced commissions just went away, and I can't afford the lifestyle that I'm in, so I'm going to have to go do something else. So you got to be able to afford to do this. I see that as a barrier of entry for a lot of people. And, you know, you may have to take the Gary Vaynerchuk approach and sell the big house and go live in a damn 2-bedroom apartment.
I think it's a barrier of entry for more people than the people don't even know that.
Right.
I think a lot of agents out there, or not agents, people who are working for agents, if $100,000 fell in their lap, they'd be like, I'm going to go open an agency.
Right.
You know, I think the money, not having the money to do it is even more so of a barrier than can be documented.
I would agree with that. I would. So, guys, I hope you're listening to this. Before we even get into Scott Howell's rules of a one-man shop, I thought we needed to have the precursor rules, the preamble. You know, we're not even in a one-man shop yet. We're just thinking about getting in the insurance business. And I'm telling you, the things that we just mentioned, if you're a one-man shop and you go through all that, and you do a jam-up business plan, and you decide what you're going to do and what you're going to write, and you've got the personality to write insurance, if you'll do everything we just mentioned, you won't be a one-man shop for long. You'll be a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 15-man shop. So
the goal is to not stay a one-man shop.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's it.
And if your goal is to stay a one-man shop, that's kind of a strange goal.
Well,
if that's your goal, call us up. We'll have you on the podcast.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily.
No, it's just strange.
But it's different, no question. And you're always, if you stay a one-man shop, you're always probably going to be at about the same level you are. And I'm going to talk about capacity. That's where I'm going with that. It's capacity. Capacity. Remember that word, people, capacity. So, okay, we've done that. So let's now get into the Scott Howell rules of a one-man shop. And remember, the intent that I have here is we're talking about these things to help you move forward and go from a one-man shop to a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, 100, 200, 300-man shop, if that's what you so choose to do. Rule number 1, if there's one thing that I could teach agents that are starting out, have started with a new company, or have just started a new independent agency, the first rule that I would tell them is to learn your product backwards and forwards and understand this. And guys, if you never listen to another word that I say on this podcast, write this down and etch it across your back in Old English letters. Your success or failure will be dictated in large part, by your ability to massage the systems that you have to get the best quote for your clients. And I know you're all sitting there thinking, Scott, what in the hell are you talking about? Well, I'm about to tell you. Most of these insurance companies that you're going to be representing have 100 different ways, it seems like, to quote a piece of business. And your job as an agent, whether it's independent or State Farm or Allstate or Nationwide, is to get the very best price for your client. I know with the different companies that I've worked for before, you could take 10 people, set them in a room, let them all quote the exact same piece of paper with the exact same information on it, and all 10 of them come up with a different quote. And if you're one of those people that just gets the piece of paper and you put all the information in and you don't give the right discounts and you don't put this in, and Bradley, what I call these are hidden mushrooms. You remember playing the game Mario Brothers when we were little?
Absolutely.
And it had the hidden mushrooms, and when you hit the hidden mushroom, you go ding, 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 and you get more points.
You say we were little like we're the same age.
I'm sorry. I keep forgetting.
When you were little. When I was little and you were starting your agency.
Exactly. So hidden mushrooms, guys, I would say that 9 times out of 10, when I lose a piece of business to somebody and their rate is $200, $300, $400, $600, $800 less than I am, when I see that, I always think to myself, there's somebody right there that found a hidden mushroom in the book or the product that they're selling. And whether it was done correctly or whether it was done in a way that, you know, if they took that to underwriting might say, don't do that. Either way, my hat's off to them for finding that hidden mushroom and figuring out a way to save this person money and getting them on board with them, right? So I'm not telling you to do something that's illegal or against the company rules.
Or data manipulation.
Or data manipulation, changing birth dates, or any of that crazy stuff. But I'm just saying you better understand how to get that client the very best price that you can. And if you're able to do that, I think it's going to go a long way towards you selling more business. That's just my opinion. You may differ from that, but you got to find those hidden mushrooms. And I told my sales manager when she hired me at Nationwide, I said, the number one thing that will separate the success or failure that I have in this company will be my ability to get in that system on home and auto insurance and figure out how to, and I hate this word, but I'm going to say it anyway, manipulate the system to understand how to give my clients the very best rate. And I did that. I figured it out. Now, I've been a part of agencies that probably don't do it the way I would do it in terms of other companies, but by golly, they get them a better rate. You know, they're paying $1,800 for homeowners insurance, and we pull the old, we're going to quote it at 80% of construction cost and then add the 20% on top, and now, we're at $1,400. Not saying I would do that, but I'm telling you there's a lot of agencies out there that pick up a lot of business by understanding how to massage, I like that word much better, the system to get people the best rate that they can. Period. End of sentence. You're not putting the student discount on. You're not putting the multi-policy discount on. You're not doing all the things that you need to do to get those people the best rate. You're not going to sell as much insurance, and then you're going to still remain as a one-man shop.
I think what you're saying, too, is asking the right questions, as in, you know, a lot of people, I know me being one of those, somebody will call in for a rate, and I just quote it and don't necessarily ask, not every time, you know, what do you do for a living? Oh, that person might be a teacher and get a discount.
Absolutely.
Having those in-depth conversations.
Yep.
That way you can find out, oh, actually, this person has a work vehicle, so one of their vehicle needs to be on pleasure, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So rule number two, and that is a very good point, brother. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Rule number 2, work your ass off. Let me just stop right here and say this. It took me 5 years to build a scratch agency to where mine, 8, 9 years, 10 years now. But the first 5 years, there weren't any vacations. There weren't any time off. My ex-wife now would call me and say, hey, we're all going to the lake today and go out on the boat with so-and-so and so-and-so. And I'd say, I got to work today till at least 3 o'clock. And it'd be a Saturday. Guys, I'm telling you, if you expect to start a scratch insurance agency with 0 premium, and you think you're going to have the teacher's summer off and 7:30 to 3
golf
o'clock
course at 2:30 on Thursday and Friday, which just drives me freaking crazy when people do that.
Stop writing your business plan right now, tear it up, and go do something else, because you're never going to make it. Just expect the first 5 years that you start a scratch agency that you're going to work 50, 60 hours a week, unless you have the financial means to not have to do that, and some people do. But you better get ready to work your ass off. The other thing, as part of rule number 2, is I would order 1,000 business cards, and I would start slinging business cards like a wild man. Nobody is going to do business with you if they don't know what you do. And you need to get out in your local community to chamber events. Bradley, you do as good a job of this as anybody I've ever met. Kudos to you.
Appreciate that.
They may not buy insurance from you, but it ain't because they don't know Bradley Flowers sells insurance.
I was at a grand opening yesterday for Burger King, which that's a joke in and of itself. But somebody commented on the Chamber's Facebook page,
right,
and said, "That's the coolest insurance agent I know."
There you go.
And there's probably 30 people in the picture, so they know what I do. And this was somebody that wasn't even there.
Right. So,
and the reason he said that is I left my sunglasses on when everybody took theirs off.
I got you. Well, guys, listen to me when I say this. You have got to get your name out there. And the easiest way to do it and the cheapest way to do it is to literally order business cards. And I heard Andy Frisella talking about this on his podcast last week. You're going to have to get over not walking up to strangers and making conversation with them and then simply saying, "Hey, here's my card. If I can ever help you with your insurance, let me know." All you're doing when you do that is you're planting the seed. Maybe they call you, maybe they don't. But you've got to get your name out in the community that you live in, and you've got to let everybody know that you're selling insurance now. That's what you're doing, and getting out in front of as many people as you can. And then also, to add to that, rule number 3, you're going to have to keep butts in the seats. And I know that's a strange rule, so let me explain.
Butts and chairs, butts and chairs.
Butts and chairs. Here's the Scott Howell rule of starting a new insurance agency. I want you guys to imagine a Ferris wheel. And I actually have a picture of a Ferris wheel in my office because to new agents, I always explain this. If you've ever seen a Ferris wheel, the big Ferris wheel has seats all the way around it. Your job as a new scratch insurance agent is to keep butts in every single one of those seats on that Ferris wheel. Because here's what happens, guys. When that Ferris wheel stops at the bottom, the person that's on that Ferris wheel is either got to do one of two things. They're either going to buy insurance from you or they're going to say no. But either way, they're getting off the Ferris wheel. And so the best analogy I can give people is you need to keep as many people on that Ferris wheel as you can. Because once somebody either buys from you or they say no to you, they just got off the Ferris wheel. And the worst thing that can happen to you is you look up at your Ferris wheel and there's nobody on it. Some people call this the sales funnel, right? That sales funnel's empty. There's nobody on the Ferris wheel. So your job as a new scratch agent is to keep as many butts in those seats as you absolutely possibly can.
Prospects.
Yes.
The guy with the most prospects is always going to have the most production.
Hey, I remember as a scratch agent having to sell 30 policies a month, and I'd actually sell one to somebody, and I think, oh, my God, I just sold a policy to that person. That means that's the one person that came off my Ferris wheel. Because they bought, and now they're gone.
Here's the thing, and this is true. The worst part about making a sale is you just lost your best prospect.
Absolutely.
And so one thing that I've done is I've sort of tricked my brain in that I actually get more excited when I add somebody to my pipeline than when I sell them. Like right now, I've got a guy. He asked me about life insurance. We went back and forth, settled on a $3 million policy on him and a $3 million policy on his wife is $650 a month. That might not be a big sale for some. That's a good size one for me.
Sure.
I literally was more excited the day we started talking about it than I will be the day that I write it.
You have never said anything on this podcast that I don't agree with more than that. I agree with more than that. And the reason I say that is I'm the exact same way.
Yeah.
When you get a prospect, at least they're up there in the Ferris wheel now.
Right.
But once that sucker gets sold, now they're coming off, and now we got to replace them with somebody else. I had an old vice president of sales tell me one time, he just retired last year. He said, when you lose 2 policies, you got to sell 4 to make up for them.
You got to make up for your time you lost going after those 2.
Absolutely. So rule number 4, and this might be the most important rule of the entire thing right here. I don't know. Can you focus on selling insurance or do you have to focus on all your other life shit that you've got going on? And I talked about this in a previous podcast before. One of the hardest things as a scratch agent or any agent, and this is something that I have been battling with the first 6 months of this year, is when you're a scratch agent, especially when you're on a sales program where excuses have to be eliminated, you cannot let all the ancillary things of life take away from your focus of selling insurance. Because it is so easy. You know, mom's got cancer. Kids were in a car wreck. My brother died. You know, my husband, I caught him cheating on me, and we're getting a divorce. My wife cheated on me, and we're getting a divorce. All these things that I call life stuff that happens. And once that happens, having the ability to put all that aside and still go out there and perform every day is a very, very tough thing.
I'll give you a tip on that. My buddy Andy Vickers, Andy V, is now the owner of F.45 Training here in Mobile's personal training gym. Has been through the Disney Institute several times, and they have something that and the Disney Institute, actually, to let all the listeners know, when we went up and met with Chris Paradiso, not that his name is not mentioned enough on this podcast, when we went up and met with him, I said, hey, Chris, what's one good conference you would tell us to go to? And he said, I'd tell you to go to the Disney Institute. Just so everybody knows, don't turn the podcast off when you hear Disney. They teach their people on stage, off stage, in character, off character.
Right.
So that's how Andy manages his people is, look, no matter what you got going on out here in the world, when you're here, you're on stage.
That's right.
On stage, off stage. You can fuss about it. You can cry as much as you want to, but do it when you get off stage. On stage, off stage.
That is very good advice. I've never heard that before, but I like that a lot. See, guys, I just learned something new today.
Yeah, and he looked at me like, why are you interrupting me when I said that? Like, just trust me, it's going to be good.
This is going to be good. This is going to be good.
Continue.
As far as the Scott Howell rules of a one-man shop, I guess the only other thing that I would add, and I'll put this down as rule number 5, and it kind of goes along with what we just talked about in rule number 4, but I think that a lot of people, especially if they have that kind of accounting, engineering mindset of they like to see numbers and crunch numbers and talk about commissions and what we've sold. I've seen a lot of girls and guys that get into a scratch agency, especially if they're with an exclusive agency force, and they start spending a whole lot more time looking at scorecard bonuses and who sold what and Excel spreadsheets and revenue connections, and they'll spend 3 or 4 hours a day looking at all that stuff and monitoring phone calls and doing all this other shit. You know what I tell my people? If you will just sell insurance, the rest of it will take care of itself. You don't have to spend 3 hours a day poring over an Excel spreadsheet over the fact that you thought you were supposed to get paid $18,742 in commissions this month, but you got paid $17,256, and you can't figure out why. And so now we need to spend 6 hours poring over that to figure that out, only to call the company and find out that they're right and you're wrong. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen. If you'll just sell insurance, the rest of it will take care of itself. And that comes in the form of slinging business cards, going to businesses and handing out donuts. You don't have to go spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month on your marketing.
I said Disney. You said businesses.
I said businesses.
Yeah, you wanna.
Oh no, I don't care. Okay. It doesn't bother me. So guys, when you're starting out, this is also the last thing I'm going to say. I said that just a minute ago, but this is going to be my last point. When you start a scratch agency or you've come on with a company that's paying you some kind of enhanced bonuses, commissions, your salary from a previous job, I've heard of companies doing that before, don't go out and buy $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 worth of office furniture and a brand new Z71 truck and the most expensive computers known to mankind. Guys, listen, you need to borrow office furniture from a buddy of yours if you can. Go to thrift stores, go to junk stores.
I knew a guy that started a scratch agency, one of these companies, and they gave him a $3,500 bonus, I think it was, to buy a computer with. And he spent the whole $3,500 on one laptop with all these features and stuff like that, and that he did not need to run the programs that he needed to run. And his first day, grand opening day, he got out of his truck and dropped the laptop and broke it.
Well,
so that's sort of a weird way to prove that point. But had you spent $1,500 on that, which would have still been a lot, you would have still had $500 left after buying 2 laptops.
Guys, keep your expenses down. If you're a scratch agent or a one-man shop, keep your expenses down. When I graduated from my program with Nationwide Insurance, I went out and I bought a 2003 red Honda Accord with the paint coming off the hood and the top of it, and drove it for about 2 years.
Scott, I'm going to ask you a personal question.
I think I paid cash. Listen to this, guys. Let me tell you what a big baller I am. I think when I graduated my program and signed my bonus to go ahead and be an agent for Nationwide, I think I spent cash $3,500 on that car. It was a big baller back then.
I'm going to ask you a serious question. What were your expenses like your first year?
Very, 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 very minimal. Mm-hmm. I went out, I bought...
and obviously being, I guess, captive, that they took care of a lot of stuff.
That would be a big negative on that because we're an independent contractor.
Gotcha.
Right? So I had a buddy of mine.
But you didn't have any subsidies or anything like that? Or
I want to say
certain, if you buy your phone system with this company, you get it cheaper because you're nationwide.
That never works out. Okay. I've tried some of that stuff before, and that ends up being more than what you can just pay, Comcast, Spectrum for a phone system. I was very, very frugal. It just so happened that the agency that I was going to take over, which was a very, very small agency after my first 3 years of being a scratch agent, there was somebody that got let go, and I took over their agency. But by the time I got it, which was 6 months after all this had happened, I think their premium had dropped down to $500,000-$600,000. So it wasn't a very, very big agency at all. But I had a buddy of mine that owned a strip center, and I worked out a deal with him that I got this 400, 500, 600 square foot space for like $700-800 a month. Drove a 2003 Honda that was paid for. Went to Walmart and bought all my computers. I think at that time I was just about to hire my first person, and I bought 2 Walmart like Dell or HP computers for like, I don't know, $300, $400, something like that. Now they were desktops, just real minimal expenses all the way around. My first 2 or 3 years. And I still to this day find myself being frugal from time to time. Like I'll blow right past the $1,500 desktop or laptop computer to buy the $700 or $800 one. So guys, keep your expenses down. Don't go buy the new car. Don't go buy the new office furniture.
Buy the 2003 Honda.
Buy the 2003 Honda. The high dollar computers, leave that off. And then the next thing I'll say is know your capacity. And Bradley, you might be able to help out with this. So how much premium can you handle before you have to hire someone? I've heard before that one good CSR can handle $1.5 million worth of personal lines, home and auto premium.
That's the standard, but I think every situation's different. Our office, we have a lot of walk-in traffic. We take a lot of cash payments compared to the average. So, you would need more, and I think it just depends on the area, Right. You in somewhere like Nashville, and I'll just say that because I'm familiar with that. It's very metropolitan. You don't have hardly any walk-ins, but you go to Mobile, Alabama, you kind of have a mix of both. You have people that want to only do business online, and you never see them, and everything's EFT. And then you also have the people that are going to come in every single month and make their payment, and you better have exact change.
Right.
The answer to that question is I think it just depends on the situation.
I completely agree with you.
There's no one right way for everything.
Well, you take a guy or girl that's writing, let's say they're writing contractor business, that they're real heavy into contractors, painters, electricians, home builders, people like that. Well, that number probably drops down to $500,000 to $800,000 because you're doing so many COI, certificates of insurance for folks, and adding additional insureds and those kinds of things. So then what you've done is you've just gotten yourself in a very labor-intensive type business model dealing with contractors, and one CSR just can't handle $2 or $3 million of that.
An agent asked me one time, said, I've got somebody who wants to move their business to me. It's about $70,000 in premium, but I'm not sure I want to do all those certificates every year. That's an interesting trade-off.
Right, yeah. Well, talk about self-awareness. I guess if you just were hell-bent against not doing that, I guess you don't need to move it. But, guys, you just got to be self-aware. You got to know your capacity. I tell Bradley this all the time. One of me can't outsell two of me. Two of me can't outsell three of me. Three of me can't outsell 10 of me. And when you're talking about what kind of business and how much you're riding, if you're a one-man show, you ain't going to outsell that agent down the street that's got 17 producers and 14 offices. That ain't going to happen. It can't happen, especially if the people he's hired are stormtroopers. If he's got stormtroopers, if she's got stormtroopers that are out there beating the streets every day and really, really jamming, that's somebody that you need to look at and say, man, you know, I'm going to work my tail off to one day be in that position. But it just takes time. You can't just go out and hire 10 or 15 people and do that, because then guess what? You've got to stop what you're doing to train all 10 or 15 of them. And then of course, we know what happens with that. Half of them fall off. You need slow, steady growth, and unless you're just going to go out and win the Florida lottery and go buy a $10, $15, $20 million independent agency. And then maybe you can...
I don't think the $20 million agencies are selling.
You don't think they are?
I don't think they're for sale.
Yeah, they probably aren't. But, guys, I hope this helped. You know,
yeah, and guys, you know, we've been getting reached out to by a lot of people.
Yep.
Let us know what you want to hear. Scott, drop your email. I'll drop mine. It's Bradley@SarahLandInsurance.com. Or shoot me a text at 251-418-4724. That's not my cell number. That is a text-only number. Shoot me a text on that number and let us know what you want to hear, Scott.
Absolutely.
I think not that we're running out of ideas or anything like that. I mean, we got people that want to be on this podcast. You know, I mean, we could record every day for a year and still have people in the tank. But we want to know what you guys want to hear.
Exactly. And so, DeCarlo Harrison, principal agent, Pikesville, Maryland. Don't say we didn't do a podcast for you, brother, because we did. And I appreciate you listening. I appreciate all of you guys listening.
That's the first guy that asked about that, about One Man Show?
He's the one that asked last week, but I've had people ask me about it before him.
Yeah.
Last week I said, you know what? I'm coming to Mobile next week. We'll record one. We'll talk about it. So that's what we just did. Guys, listen, I'm going to wrap this thing up. You need to get your ass out there and go sell some insurance today for your family. Do not sit behind your desk and aggressively wait for the phone to ring, because those days are over. You need to write good business for the agency that you represent. You need to write good business for the companies that you represent. And Mr. Bradley Flowers, I love you. Have a great rest of the week, and we will see you all next time on the Insurance Guys Podcast. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Insurance Guys Podcast. If you need to know more about me or you need to get in touch with Scott, you can always reach me at theinsuranceguyonline.com or email me at iprotectins@gmail.com. And if you need to get in touch with Mr. Bradley Flowers, go to bradleyflowersinsurance.com or email him at bradley@sarahlandinsurance.com. Guys, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to being with you again real soon on the next episode of The Insurance Guys. Take care.